Hello and welcome to Give a Helping Hand, brought to you by Kanawha County Schools Television, Sunlink Communications, and the United Way of Central West Virginia. I'm Margaret O'Neal. I am with the United Way, and it's my pleasure today to give you a little update about what's going on in the United Way before we introduce you to our guest today. Just to let you know, our goal this year for our annual campaign was $1,850,000. We're approaching the end of that thermometer. As you can see, we're about 70% of that goal. Although 30% is still a little ways to go. We would just encourage you, if you're watching, that if you have an opportunity and you believe in the United Way message and you would like to help the people in the 5 counties that we serve, believe me when I tell you every dollar counts, and we'd be happy to talk to you about how we could work with your company on a workplace campaign and share the mission and the message of the United Way. In that light, because we are just a little short of that goal, we do have an upcoming fundraiser. So we're excited to announce our first ever cash bash. And if you're interested in how you could make a quick $10,000, we can help you out with that. The United Way is having a little party. We're going to be at the Marriott on March the 9th. Very casual, free parking, and for a $100 donation to the United Way, a chance to win some prizes, get a nice Italian pasta dinner from the Marriott, and at the end of the evening, somebody will win up to $10,000 cash, and we won't pressure you to give that back to United Way unless you want to, although it is tax deductible. So thank you if you're watching. If you have a chance to join us on March the 9th, please do, and if you'd like more information, certainly reach out to us at the United Way, and we're happy to explain the details. Now on to why we're here today, and so a brief message about why it's important to the United Way for you as our listeners and people in the community to know a little bit about what we do. And it's pretty simple. We're tasked to look outside our window in the 5 counties that our United Way serves, so that includes Kanawha, Putnam, Boone, Logan, and Clay, and we try to see through the eyes of our community leaders, through teachers, through students, through nonprofit organizations, government officials, anybody really that we talk to, and identify the challenges and then try to find strong solutions that can help with those problems. And today we're going to talk about one of the challenges that we saw as we looked out that window in Charleston. As soon as I came to town, we started to hear about some homeless issues and the challenges that people in our community face, both as a person who may not be housed and may need resources, as well as the providers who work every day to try to provide safety to those folks and safety to our community. So with me today is what I think is one of my newest and bestest friends since I came to Charleston, but Traci Strickland. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Traci is the executive director of the Kanawha Valley Collective. I've got to get my K words in order today. And you also work with the Prestera Center, which we would say is your real job, probably.
Yes, that's my real job.
And so we thank you for your service to the community for years and years and years, and your care and concern for the people who aren't housed and who, for whatever reasons, and we're going to talk a little bit about what those reasons are, but for whatever reason, they're just maybe not in the place that we think they should be, but maybe they're in the perfect place that they think they should be. And so tell me first what the Kanawha Valley Collective is and a little bit about how that operates, because I personally think it's a model of work that can be used across the country to really provide help to people in that particular area.
So the Kanawha Valley Collective is a HUD-defined continuum of care. So there are continuums of care all across the country. The state of West Virginia has 4 separate ones. And continuums of care actually started as funding entities. It was a way for communities to apply for HUD funding, hopefully in a way that didn't duplicate services. So even 10 years ago, COC work was really kind of seasonal. We had a few big things we did a year, and that was really kind of it, because the focus was on the agencies. And as time has gone on and government has changed and funding has changed, the COC, Continuum of Care, is actually kind of the lead force for the area in coordinating homeless services. And some of those services are funded through the HUD Continuum of Care process, some through other HUD grant programs, and then we have members that don't receive HUD funding at all that work with people who are homeless or at risk of being homeless, or are really just community members interested in solving this issue.
So that'd be like the United Way, because I don't receive HUD funding, but we are very interested in solving the challenges. So when I came to Charleston to the United Way and I walked in the room the first day, I went to this thing called the KVC, and I didn't know what it was. What impressed me were the variety of providers around the table, and how what is not always common is how all those providers were willing to set aside their own personal agendas or their own agency agendas and really work together to provide best practices and best services available to that community. So that's super impressive to me. When you and I recently went out and counted some folks, do you want to talk a little bit about the point in time count and how it marries to that HUD funding piece?
Yeah, so the point in time count is mandated by HUD to be completed during the last 10 days of January. And people always ask why during the coldest time.
And you don't decide that. That's not a Traci Strickland decision.
No, I definitely did not decide that. But it's really about when it's cold, you're going to have more people in shelter than on the streets. So in theory, it's easier to find people and to count individuals because they're more likely to be inside. The shortcomings of a point in time count is it is a one-day snapshot. So if you don't find someone, they don't get counted. So the point in time number is usually, not that it's not accurate, but it's always a little low. We went out this year and there's people that we didn't find that I was particularly looking for. But it's really just a one-day snapshot of what homelessness is in your area.
And that's done around the state and around the country, right? Not just here.
It's always done in the last 10 days of January. We count the same time as the Huntington Continuum of Care because there's a lot of crossover between Charleston and Huntington. So if they counted it the third week and we counted the fourth week, we could very well count some of the same people that have gone back and forth. Our number the last 2 years has been around 319. In 2016, it was 320. In 2017, it was 319. We're still working on finalizing that number, but we're going to have a number at the end of the month, just a general number. And there's a lot of things that go into really the counting and the deduplication of people. And we not only are counting individuals, but we're looking at how many veterans, how many children. So there's a lot of kind of subpopulation information that won't get counted till later on in the spring. This is something that we have to turn into HUD usually in May. It also is coupled with our HUD funded programs and the count of the people in those. So it's the point in time is just a small piece of really this large report we do to HUD every spring, and it dictates part of our NOFA funding for the area. And the NOFA is our annual HUD grant. We have 15 grantees or so that are funded through that process. And oddly enough, HUD wants to see that number reduce. So we get better, I think, at counting. We get more thorough at counting every year, which helps the numbers go up when we're really wanting to see a reduction in those numbers.
So that's interesting in itself, right? And so, since you brought it up, we'll talk a little bit about what's going to happen at the end of the month. So February the 27th, there will be a symposium on the issue at hand. And so the city of Charleston has had a task force in place now for, I guess going on 2 years to address this issue. And so Ms. Becky Sepperly from City Council has chaired that committee. And so you, along with some others, are going to be at the Civic Center on the 27th from 6 to 8 p.m. to do this kind of same thing with a little more time to shed some light on the issue and what's going on. But so while we're talking about that, one of the things that came up is really the definition of homelessness, right? And so we have this, from the police perspective, we have what they would consider criminal vagrants that sometimes appear homeless. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. We have literal homeless people who I've heard since I've been, live under the bridge, the under the bridge folks. And then there are people who sometimes may appear homeless, but and others in the service field know that they are housed, that they just choose to perhaps walk around town or to visit other service providers by walking. So it's really important for people in the community to understand the difference in those definitions. Do you want to, I love your definition, your true definition of homeless people. Well,
really, you kind of hit every point. it's part of the point in time, and part of what HUD is looking at is looking at what they call literally homeless people, which are people that are staying in emergency shelters or in places not meant for human habitation, whether it's a vehicle, a park, under the bridge, in doorways and alleys. And then you have the individuals that are doubled up, and you'll often hear kind of the slang term couch surfing. And sometimes those individuals are going in and out of homelessness, or other times they're just really barely avoiding homelessness because they have the resource of friends to often bounce around to. But what's kind of interesting when people see individuals that they think are homeless, and sometimes they're formerly homeless, because you've seen someone in an area
Right.
Who's been experiencing homelessness in that area of town, and if they get housed in that area of town, you'll still see them, and they don't look incredibly different. So people still think people are just out hanging around.
Yeah, so we don't have a sign that says I'm not homeless anymore,
Right.
or I am homeless. So yeah, and we do tend to judge as people.
We do. I've done it as well, and I know that through some of Prestera's outreach efforts, I've been out and I've approached people that by their appearance, they very well could have been homeless.
Right.
And you go to talk to them, and really you have people living in poverty, and there's 5 or 6 people sharing an apartment, which isn't an ideal living situation probably, because it's slightly crowded, but they're staying off the streets and they are in a safe place getting their needs met.
So I think from the United Way perspective, and I'll just give you 2 quick United Way stories, and this is really and this happened a few years ago, but it was really one of the things that got my attention for folks that that saying of there by the grace of God go I. So I think a lot of people tend to judge a homeless person as someone who has brought that on themselves. These are some of the language that I hear from other people, right? Oh, it's because they drink or they do drugs. A plethora of things that we hear. So we're at the United Way, and this lady comes in, young woman, and she says, is there a safe parking lot around here where I can park my car to sleep? And so, we're United Way, so we jump on that, and we're like, well, no, no, there isn't, and can you give us a little, background on what your situation is? And so this woman was working a full-time job, and as it turned out, had 2 children that were sleeping in the car with her, 2 young children. She was receiving services to pay for child care for those kids, so she took them to child care. She went to work every day, and she picked them up, and they showered and bathed in community bathrooms and others, and she was paying her car payment or insurance, and that was every bit of what she could do with the funds that she had. So clearly, that was a person who needed immediate assistance and received that from some rapid rehousing programs and things that you're aware of. So that was my first aha moment of sometimes things happen to people and they're not on drugs, and they're not that they're just living in a really high poverty situation and doing the best they can with what they have. So we really want to make people think about not just what we would consider a criminal person or a vagrant who is harming people or to be afraid of. Some of the people you work with are just like me and you, just something bad happened, right?
Yep.
And so when you were doing your survey, one of the things I thought was interesting that sometimes homelessness is caused by death. So do you want to speak to that at all?
I mean, I was really surprised at, really, when you think about people that are doubled up and people who are using their resources that are friends and family, if part of your support system passes away, then there's one less place for you to go. And then there's also the financial constraints that can come with death, and then just, not necessarily the long-term mental illness, but grief. Right. How do you carry on? And we did a survey that is going to be discussed at the symposium, and one of the things that struck me was the number of individuals who had cited death as the reason that they became homeless. And it wasn't an extremely high number. I mean, it was less than 10%,